QuickBooks Online 2025, help and support options. Get ready and some coffee because we're learning how to save time with QuickBooks Online 2025. Here we are online in our browser searching for that QuickBooks Online test drive, the free sample company file available to everybody. Looking for the result that has Intuit.com in the URL because, of course, Intuit is the owner of QuickBooks. We're choosing the United States version of the software, verifying that we are not a robot, at least not yet. I've ordered those AI robot implants so I can play video games faster, but they're not here yet. So right now I'm good to go. I'm still allowed in QuickBooks Online sample company file, Craig's design and landscaping. Let's go into the reports on the left-hand side. I'm just kidding. I didn't really order any head implants to play video games faster, but I don't know if it'd be nice to be super fast at the video. In any case, we're going to right click and open the balance sheet, right click and open the profit and loss link as we do every time. Let's close this prior tab. We don't need it anymore. Get out of here. And let's go to that middle tab, close up the hamburger and change the range as we do every time. 010124 tab, 123125 tab, selecting the drop down for years, run it to refresh it. The 24 and 25 are now side by side on the years. Let's go to the side to the right of the tabs, close the ham boogie, and we'll change that range again. 010124 tab, 1231. That's not a 12. 123125. And we'll see it in years. Run it to refresh it. Noting there's nothing in currently 2025 except for that 7398 for some reason, including not having prior presentation transactions. Why? Because we reset the information, opened up an incognito window, so it didn't pull over the cookies for the information from the prior presentations, which I recommend you do as well, so we're as close to the same information as possible going forward. Let's go back to the tab we started on. I know I've got some extra tabs over here this time because we're going to get into this time the help options for QuickBooks Online. So note that QuickBooks Online, being one of the most popular softwares for small to mid-sized businesses, has a vast array of help options, which is great. However, it can be a little bit confusing as well because when we have too many choices, we tend to freeze up, get paralyzed. We don't know what to do. There's too many clothes in the closet, right? I can't pick anything out. I just want my one shirt. I just wear the same thing every day. That'll make it easy. That's what I want to have happen. So what we need to do is kind of sort through all of the different help options. One of the ways that I would recommend sorting through all the help options is try to categorize what your objective is and then try to list the help procedures that you would go through based on those objectives. So objective number one would be, the two main categories would be, are you looking for help with something that's related to the technical functioning of the software and or the payment options of the software, like billing type of questions, where of course you might want to be going to QuickBooks support directly, contacting Intuit, the owner of QuickBooks, because they're the ones that are going to help you with the actual technical kind of software issues. Number two, you need help with like bookkeeping kind of questions, how to set up the software, how to process the software, how to deal with tax information and general ledger accounts and that kind of stuff. You could still, there are QuickBooks options as well, but that is an area where you might be leaning towards other kind of options, such as keeping your CPA firm or accounting or tax firm in the loop, no matter what option you do, and possibly talking to, an accountant expert. Most accountants having familiarity with QuickBooks, as it's one of the most, popular types of software, or possibly looking in the help option here within the system, or looking elsewhere, such as Googling, or such as doing, YouTube search, looking for videos in that type of format, which is kind of a random search, but there's a lot of good stuff, although you have to sort through a lot of not great stuff. And then they also have the AI searches now. So ChatGPT is currently the most popular, I believe, AI source. So it might not be perfect, but it might be able to sort this information a little bit better for specific types of questions. So I find that to be interesting. Not perfect, but a good option to look at. All right, so what are the help options that we have available to us? Well, the main help options we have, number one, the help button in the QuickBooks itself, which is going to be a text kind of search type of option. Number two, we've got the Intuit website. So we can go to the Intuit website and look for help options there. Number three, we might have purchased support within QuickBooks. So we might have support in general for subscription, billing, technical problems, and we might try to up our subscription for more support for specific things like bookkeeping and possibly payroll options. And then, of course, again, we have YouTube searches, Google searches, where QuickBooks information, although it's not going to be perfect, is most likely more plentiful than other types of software, such as possibly one of its top competitors in the same kind of category is Xero accounting software. And I would think that if you compared the amount of resources available by people just posting resources between the two, QuickBooks would be vastly more than Xero. So again, there's pros and cons with that. On the Xero side of things, they have their own benefits. One of them possibly being that they might be a little less, laser focused on the U.S. kind of thing and more global, and have their eye on more of those types of things. And you could have a situation where, because they're a little bit smaller, maybe they're less bureaucratic and whatnot, and I might be able to help out more people in a more traditional way because of that. So there's pros and cons to both of those, but one of the benefits of QuickBooks is that there should be at least a lot of stuff out there that we could sort through. Okay, so let's just take a look first at the kind of subscription items. So if I go over to QuickBooks, just remember that when you purchase QuickBooks, so I'm on QuickBooks, this is Intuit's the owner of QuickBooks, and then I'm in the QuickBooks area, which basically I found at the bottom of the page, and I just went into the QuickBooks Online, and you can then look at the different plans that they have here, noting that they have these options for live assistance. So that would be a type of help option that they're experimenting with more availability. Now, QuickBooks has pretty neat programs to try to get QuickBooks experts, trying to give some kind of certifications sometimes for people to be experts within QuickBooks. Now, note that however you're dealing with a QuickBooks expert, whether you're a business owner hiring like a bookkeeper, or you're getting advice from a bookkeeper, or basically a QuickBooks expert within or from Intuit, you want to always try to keep the end goal in mind, which most likely means you're going to be communicating with your CPA firm, tax firm, at least at the end of the year, because that's the end goal. You want, in the United States, we have to at least do the taxes, even if we're a small business. And beyond that, we might need extra financial reporting needs for external reporting and or for loans and stuff like that. That means that we want to keep in the loop the person that's going to ultimately be creating the end product, the tax return at least, which is going to be our CPA firm. So any bookkeepers and whatnot that we bring on board, or any kind of other assistance we have, we want to keep the end goal in the loop typically. Now, so they have this live assistant. So we connect with live experts when you need it. They can provide setup help and bookkeeping guidance in QuickBooks so you can stay organized and run your business with confidence. So I personally, it's for free 30 days. So they're experimenting, it looks like, with this option to see if you want to be purchasing added support. Now, I'm not completely convinced that this is the best way to go yet, but it's interesting option that you might kind of experiment with. You might try out that 30-day trial. Remember that I would basically say you want to talk to Intuit itself when you have technical issues, which means not bookkeeping issues, but the software is not doing what it is, or you need billing help on it. And this is going to be more towards the bookkeeping help, and possibly, most likely, they're setting this up mainly for the setup process, which is mostly the more labor-intensive process, the more difficult process. Once you have that foundation, kind of like an infrastructure, if you're building a city or something like that, you need to have the foundations, you need to have the roads, you need to have the water pipelines in there. Once that's in place, you can build on top of it fairly easily. So one way you might think of this type of help is possibly at least for the setup process. But personally, I would still go for help with that, my CPA firm if I had one, to help with that in kind of process setup. If you have a tax preparer, they might help as well. But if you're a business, even a sole proprietor, and your tax preparer doesn't have an accounting background, but mainly does individual income taxes, that might not be the best preparer for you, right? Because as you get more into a business situation, you're going to need a little bookkeeping understanding, even just to create the Schedule C, basically. And then they've got tax help. Save time and effort by seamlessly moving from books to taxes, then prepare your current tax year return with unlimited expert help to get every credit you deserve. Access live tax experts powered by TurboTax. Now, note that TurboTax is also owned by Intuit, so they're trying to integrate their small business kind of components for QuickBooks and then TurboTax. Now, note that TurboTax might be most useful for types of individual tax preparers that have like a Schedule C type of business. If you have like a partnership or an S corporation, then you might not be using, you probably want to get more expert tax professional help in that case, because your business is probably a little bit larger, probably a little bit more complicated. You're going to have to make another tax return and then have like K-1s that flow through and so on. So just that's number one. Now Intuit owns other taxes as well, including, I believe, Lacert, but it's a much more expensive tax software, not for individual use per se, but typically purchased by tax firms, although I think you can buy it individually, but it's going to cost a lot more than TurboTax. So they've experimented with some kind of components in the past to try to give line items in QuickBooks so that it can be converted into TurboTax pretty as easily as possibly. But that, as far as I can see right now, I've been playing with it. I've played with it for a long time and tested out. It's not a perfect seamless, move from QuickBooks to TurboTax. You're basically going to generally have to create the income statement and then input that into the tax return in TurboTax, which means that basically you can, in essence, use kind of any kind of tax software because you're going to have to do the data input basically manually. So you want to kind of think about what's the best tax software for long-term use as you have a business. I would think more likely, if you're not a tax expert, you possibly want to get help with taxes beyond possibly a support by Intuit for TurboTax. So again, I would think that this is a very specific type of help that's helping with a specific small business clients. I would think they're going to be somewhat limited in their knowledge, as opposed to if you went to a CPA firm that might be able to give you more specialized knowledge. This is my opinion, of course, as a CPA, but so take it, I have my biases, but so that's that option. So you have that option as well that you can look into. Now, also, if you purchase the software and you buy payroll, you're going to have similar kind of components with payroll. So remember, the options with payroll are, do I want to do payroll within QuickBooks, which means I'm going to have to pay more for it typically, or purchase outside, work with a third-party person like an ADP or a Paychex to help me to process all the payroll. If I do payroll inside of QuickBooks, I want to at least buy the basic payroll plan typically, because in the United States, at least, payroll is quite complex and the software will really help to not make mistakes being easy to make in payroll. And so and that'll help you do the 941s to 940s and so on. But you also could have options for payroll support, added payroll support, which might give you some guarantees on accuracy of payroll and so on and so forth. So that's another option that you might look into, and that will be dependent on the types of clients you're getting and working with. And then what's your integration when you're working on bookkeeping and possibly a third-party firm like an ADP and a Paychex, and possibly your CPA firm. Remember, and you always want to get the CPA firm in the loop, because payroll is also going to be basically reflected on the tax return if you're in the United States, and you have to reconcile what you deduct on the tax return to what you report on payroll, which can be seen on the W-2s and W-3s, 940s and 941s, or else you have an incongruity that you're giving to the IRS, and that'll be a problem, or that could be a problem in the event of an audit. All right, and then we have, you could just look at the Intuit website, of course, intuit.com, and then just go into QuickBooks and search for, chats and whatnot, or support on the Intuit website itself. So the website changes. If you go down to the bottom, they have the different search options that are there for more often. So you have resources, learn, support, product support, tutorials, so blogs, free invoice generating, invoice templates. So you might go into, tutorials. So this might be a little bit more specific of an area to go than to go to like just do a Google search or something like that. But you would think that this is going to be similar, this type of search, similar to if you're in QuickBooks itself and you went up to the default search for a specific bookkeeping need. So let's say you're doing bookkeeping, you have a question about a specific item, how to enter an invoice or how to add an item or something. Then the first place you would go for that type of question might be the help menu, right? And you're going to go, okay, what if I'm going to add an item? Or what if I want like sales tax set up or something, right? And then you're going to have your search down here for set up and use automated sales tax, learn more, set up where you collect tax, and so on and so forth. So obviously this is going to be a search-based system that's integrated, or within QuickBooks is possibly the first place that you would go for a technical kind of question if you have a problem. So for those kind of questions, I would, again, always keep your CPA firm in mind if you're going to do anything drastic, right? Don't mess with it. And then I would search here, and then I might do a Google search or a YouTube search, and I also might search ChatGPT, because sometimes it compiles the resources in a pretty clear, in actually a more clear way, and it's compiling, you would think, most of the resources from the Intuit website itself and from blogs and whatnot. So that could be a good resource for those types of questions. So that's going to be those questions. And then again, you always want to keep your CPA firm kind of in the loop. So you remember that you can share your file because it's online, which is great, with a CPA. So my accountant, you can basically give them actually access to the software typically. Now, so that is going to be a huge possible benefit. Noting again that when you talk or think about picking up a CPA firm or a tax preparer in the United States, for small businesses, your main concern might be taxes, which is fine. But some tax preparers may have more or less expertise in businesses. And if you do taxes, even for small businesses, it would really be helpful to know some bookkeeping information like adjusting entries, because you're going to have to do at least a few adjusting entries for taxes. In other words, one of the reasons, like the software, they haven't been able to integrate the software to just create your taxes. So in other words, you know that Intuit owns QuickBooks and Intuit owns TurboTax. So you would think you can just enter your information into QuickBooks, and if you did it right, you can just integrate QuickBooks to TurboTax. Or why don't they just make a QuickBooks to have tax integrated in it that can actually generate your Form 1040 with a Schedule C on it or something like that? And one of the reasons they can't really do that is because there's at least a few things that you're pretty much always going to have a problem with taxes. One of them is, for example, the auto mileage, right? Because they're going to do it. If you use a mileage method for automobiles, well, then that's not how you're going to bookkeep for it in QuickBooks, because you're going to just put it in there for how much you actually spent on it. You also might have problems if you have personal expenses, breaking out the personal, versus the business. So there's just a few things that are always going to be kind of an issue. So that's why I haven't seen a better method of integration to just go seamlessly from one software to the other. You're going to have to basically take the income statement, and then I would put it into Excel and do a couple adjusting entries in Excel so I can see it in a transparent format, and then enter it into QuickBooks or your tax software so that you can see the reconciliation, so that you can then be prepared for the event of an audit, which hopefully doesn't happen. But if it does, it might happen 3 years later, in which case you're going to have totally forgotten what you reported, and you would like to have the reconciliation and possibly some communication with the CPA firm or tax preparer that made it, which oftentimes, again, people don't really think about until it's too late, right? 3 years later comes, you get audited, you don't talk to anybody, you're not talking to the person that assisted you at QuickBooks for TurboTax, or you got just a quick tax preparer, but you're not communicating with them, and now you don't really know exactly what happened, and you're kind of at the mercy of the auditor in that case, right? So in any case, but again, that's my bias as an accountant. But I would recommend, if you're getting into a business, that you look for an accountant that has some bookkeeping experience, which usually, if they're a CPA, they would have an extensive amount of just accounting knowledge. So just to keep that in mind. And then of course you can share your file with them and kind of keep them in the loop. They might be, and obviously most CPA firms and tax preparers, if they deal with business returns, would be familiar with QuickBooks Online, because it's one of the largest types of software, and for small to mid-size businesses. So that's the general idea. So when you're looking for help, the question is, do I need technical help? Do I need billing help? Or do I need bookkeeping help? If you need technical help on the software, then of course you want to contact Intuit itself and say, hey, the software is not working, or my account's having a problem, or the billing's changed, I need to level up on my billing, or do I have access to this resource or whatever. If you have bookkeeping problems, then I would always want to keep your accountant, the end result, in mind. The end result, I want to get the financial statements correct to make taxes as easy as possible and year-end reporting. Therefore, I'm going to keep my accountant in the loop as I look for resources, which might be in the help button here, might be in a Google search, might be on the website. And then I can think about using and paying for the added resources within QuickBooks. But personally, I'm somewhat still skeptical of that, although I think it has possible potential, but it's still not been proven. It's not proven to me yet to be the place to go. I'd rather go to a CPA firm if I would. But so that's the general idea.